welcome back and welcome all the new subscribers. Today is a very ambitious video. It's called the Complete Comic Book Workflow from Script to Print, where I go through my whole scripting process and how I get the files to the letters and to the printer. So here we go. The first part is of course the scripting phase. I promised to start from the very beginning, so instead of starting with panel descriptions, I'm going to go all the way back to when I'm plotting out the story. So I've got this little notebook, little sketches in there to inspire me, and this is where I plot out the story. And in the beginning, what I do is I write the page number on the left-hand side, and I write a couple words or a couple sentences about what's going to happen on that page. But very quickly, I go on to mapping out each page, and as you can see in this image, I'm starting off with page 1 on the right, and then going 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is really important to know where the story is on the page, because a comic book usually starts on the right-hand side of a 2-page layout, like you can see in this comic of The Flash. And you've got to know which is the right-hand side and which is the left-hand side, because on the bottom right, there's always a page turn. So these are little elements that build tension at the lower right-hand side of any comic on the right-hand page. And so you've got to know where your right-hand page is and where your left-hand page is so that you can put those page turns in. So next to each little square or spread, I write just 1 or 2 sentences to show what's going on that page. And I purposely do them small because not that much can happen on a comic book page. I'm not trying to script or write dialogue. At this point, I'm just putting the major plot points, the twists, the major events. So you look at my notebook, I've plotted out a couple pages here, and I just write 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 sentences to sum up what's happening. You want to use this method also to plug in where your chapter markers are, because some comics and graphic novels are going to have splash pages, spreads, and chapter markers. So here's another one where I've mapped out the first 24 pages, but then I really wanted to find out where the comic was going to end. Is page 24 on the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Those page turns really drive your story along. It's what gets the reader to turn to the next page of the comic book. Sometimes it can be really gimmicky, but sometimes it can be really compelling. Now, this book, The Creators, is unique because it starts the story on the left-hand side. Right away, the comic starts on the left-hand side and not the right, like most comic books. So you've got to map that out. But the page turns are still there on the bottom right of the right-hand page. So it's critical that when you're doing the plotting, you're making sure that your comic book is the right length. You don't want to have this huge story in your head and then it turns out it's only 8 pages long. But you also have to get the page turns right. So now, when you're done the plot and story, you've got to create something, instructions, to send to your artist. So this is the next step. I'm describing every panel as best I can, as much detail as I can, telling the artist exactly where in each panel to put what. Now, I, for myself, keep a little sketchbook where I sketch out the panel layout, and these little ones that you see, these are just for me, so I know that stuff will fit. I don't send these to the artist. In the beginning, I put a lot of description in my scripts, and then as I go on, I give the artist more freedom because the artist is much more talented than I am. I cannot draw. But sometimes, if the pages are really complicated, I do sketch them out. So these are sketches that I'm going to send to my artist because these are complicated. I've got reflections, I've got adjacent panels, and here's a little character description because that character is kind of funky. Now I email my scripts, character sketches, and sketches to my artist, and she is sending me back these. These are initial sketches that she's doing. These are layouts so that she knows that everything fits with some basic angles. Well, not very basic. It's pretty amazing. And once I approve it all, she sends me the line art. And so I'm getting Photoshop files with layers and transparency. And so I'm getting a Photoshop file for every page of the script. And you can see she's an amazing artist. She's from the Republic of Georgia. And her art is way better than mine. That is my funky little drawing, and here is her finished artwork. She's extremely talented. Here again is the before and after. That's my sketch. This is her sketch, and then this is the finished page. It looks absolutely beautiful. You get the idea. She's an amazing artist, and here are my little stick figures. But anyway, it helps me visualize the page. So now I'm sending the line art off to the colorist, and they come back from the colorist looking like this. The pages look absolutely fantastic when they come back from the colorist. But what we got to do now is we got to put the letters on these. And I usually send these files to a letterer, but this time, for this comic book, it's called Monitor, I'm doing the letters myself. And this can get complicated because your images are in Photoshop, but you've got to do your letters in Illustrator. So you can see I've got a Photoshop file for every single page of my comic book. So let's open this one Photoshop file. This is the first page of Monitor, and there's no letters on there. Now I'm going to make a corresponding Illustrator file. So page1.ai, this is an Illustrator file where I'm going to put the letters. Now I have a background which is a low-res version of page 1, and I've got it dimmed to 50%. So this is not what we're going to use for the image. This is how we're going to put on the letters. So in Illustrator, what you do is you've got these two layers. The front layer is your word balloons and your text, and the background is a low quality version of your image, of your comic book, of your graphics and lines and colors. And so what you do is you work on this top layer and you make your word balloons and you add in the text. And this is in Adobe Illustrator, and you save it. So you create your text, and we're saving it out right now onto that Illustrator file. Now I've got Photoshop open, I've got that one file open, and I just drop the Illustrator file onto the Photoshop file. And look at that. It's in there now. But it's in there as a smart object. What does that mean? It means that I can still edit this Illustrator file. If I double click that little guy right there, I can open it in Illustrator and I can edit it. So, because as you see, I didn't finish the word balloon. So I go in there, I edit it, I make my changes, I hit Command S to save it, I can hit Command W to close it, and I'm going back. It's automatically going to take me back to my Photoshop file where I have that smart object layer, and it's going to automatically change the changes that I made. You see how weight moved a little bit? It shifted down, right? The text shifted. But the quality got reduced. Why did it get reduced? Because I didn't do it right in Illustrator. I need to make sure that that is invisible. I need to make that low quality background invisible. And then you're going to save it, Command S, and you're going to close it, Command W, and it's going to save out your Illustrator file again with no background, so it's going to show up transparent. And then you're back in Photoshop, and Photoshop's going to have to think a little bit because you changed the Illustrator file. You're back in Photoshop, Photoshop's going to think a little bit, and then all of a sudden your background is going to go from low res to high res because you made that background transparent. So this is the power of smart objects. You can drag an Illustrator file onto a Photoshop file, and it's editable. And now we're going to talk about one last thing. We're going to talk about prepping your files for print. So if you're here, it means that you've gone through the whole process. You are a one-person show making your own comic book or graphic novel. So by now, your file should look like what we have here on the screen. This should be a background file, which is a rasterized image of your comic book, and then an Adobe Illustrator file on top, which is a smart object of your letters. Now you've got to add some more layers in between the background and layers. And the reason why you want to do this, and you have to, is because when your file goes to the printer, it's going to change. So if you're printing this on paper, you've got to do one important thing, and that's sharpening. So there's two ways that I usually do it. Your sharpening layers need to be non-destructive. So here's way number one. You copy your background layer. You hit Command J if you're on a Mac and make a copy of your background layer. And then you go to Filter, Other, and then High Pass. And High Pass, it will make your layer look very, very strange at first. And you're going to adjust it and hit OK. And then you've got to change the blend mode to either Soft Light or Overlay. And this sharpens your image significantly. This is a non-destructive process. You see it's a separate layer, and that's really important because your sharpening is going to be different whether you're on matte paper or glossy paper, and if you're putting this on the web, you don't want to sharpen it at all. There's another way that you can do non-destructive sharpening. That is making a smart object as a filter. So you go up to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. So now you have a smart filter, which is a smart object, and you can go to Sharpening. And I usually use Unsharp Mask out of habit, but if you've got the processing power, you can do Smart Sharpen. You sharpen it the way you want, and now look, your sharpening is actually a different layer that you can turn on and off. So like I said, it's really important that you be able to turn on and off your sharpening and your other adjustment layers. So you put more adjustment layers on like this. You go and you create these adjustment layers, either hue, saturation, curves, or levels, and you're going to change your file for the type of printer and the type of paper that you're using, because CMYK is going to change your blues to purples, and you've got to change those back. On certain types of paper, you're going to have to lighten it, add more contrast. So you need a separate package of adjustment layers for every type of output that you have, and so these need to be non-destructive, and you need to be able to turn them on and off. So once you get your adjustment layers the way you want, I wrap them all up into a single group. So I hit New Group from Layers, and I label it whatever, matte paper or glossy paper, and I save it, and then you can turn on and off your print adjustments. Alright, we made it. So that's my whole workflow, from plotting out the story to scripting to sketching it out, getting my art from the artist, having the colors do the colors, and all the way to letters and print output. So I hope this was interesting. I hope it was fun. Gave you a little bit of insight into how I make my comic books as a writer, but also as a producer and somebody who's doing the titles and sending this to the printer. So if you liked it, leave comments, hit like, subscribe, of course. If you've got something you'd like me to cover in more detail, just leave it in the comments, and I'd be happy to respond or make a video. So have a great day. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for watching, and I hope you check out Monitor when it comes out next year.